A while ago, that YouTube channel Transparency did a clever video about simulations of working-class jobs. Those two beat me to the idea, denying me the glory of the kill. But let's look at another working-class job simulation, this one on the Famicom disk system. Electrician was developed by Kemco and released in December 1986, the same year as the Dig Dug 2 Famicom port, and, somewhat more notably, The Legend of Zelda. This cutesy arcade-style game depicts a great disaster striking New York City, a complete blackout after an earthquake. Apparently, this also affects the rest of the US somehow. In most video games, this would be the work of terrorists or aliens, but Electrician keeps it real. This is just a natural disaster. To respond to the Great Disaster, the player takes on the role of a far greater hero than the run-of-the-mill Famicom knight, ninja, or soldier. An electrician, Richard Light. I notice Richard Light has the same teal and magenta color scheme Konami was fond of in the early days, but this is from Kemco. Electrician consists of 8 worlds, each except for World 8, consisting of 2 levels. First the building, and then the underground. World 8 is just the building level. In the building levels, you hop and climb around inside the walls of increasingly tall high-rises, stringing wires along to restore power to apartments. When the power comes back on, you can see the furnishings inside, a cute touch. The greatest dangers are the stiff jumping and the narrow space you have to maneuver in. A fall of more than 2 floors will cause Richard to die a splattery death. Like in real life, after you jump, you can't change trajectory or direction, and it's easy to slightly miscalculate a jump, causing Richard to bonk his head on the floor of the room above him and go spiraling down. New York City is, of course, a pit of repulsive filth, so you share these crawl spaces with vermin that are oddly determined to tear down Richard Light's wires and kill him. Most enemies behave the same way. They crawl up and down the walls from their spawn point, tear down any inactive wire they touch, and cause you to lose a life if they touch Richard. Certain enemies exhibit more unique behaviors. The giant spiders, for instance, spin invisible webs that can temporarily ensnare Richard if he runs into them. Another enemy is the giant fly, which first appears in the building level of World 4. The flies are harmless to the touch, but periodically sweep across a floor of the building, knocking Richard off if he is in their path. Once you complete the circuit of a given story of the building, the wires become electrified, and enemies die one after another trying to break the wires and being zapped instead. Except the flies. The sudden light can also startle a burglar into fleeing. If you catch the burglar, you can gain an extra life, which takes the form of a bell. Reminds me of Twinbee. The decreased enemy count causes the level to become increasingly easy, with each floor electrified, and allows the player to rack up points by idly waiting for enemies to crawl in and die in waves. Beginning in World 5, a lethal spark blasts along the live wires, killing Richard upon touch. This is much deadlier than any enemy, and adds a smidgen of strategy, as Richard can't outrun the spark. You always want to begin wiring from the inert side, moving toward the live side. For some reason, you can choose the game speed before each level, which considerably affects the difficulty. Always keep it on low. On high, the spark moves so quickly it's just a death sentence. The level screen for each world also shows a unique picture of Richard. Unnecessary touches like that show the developers weren't just shoveling this out, but working with an attention to detail. If these wires are sparking like this, though, that's a major fire hazard. Richard isn't a very good electrician. A daring man who stares death in the face? Yes. But this is some lousy wiring. I listened to a podcast where people write in about workplace safety issues, and the worst of them pales in comparison to this. Actually, that's not true. If there were also vats of boiling, skin-melting acid all around, then probably it would be worse. In any case, this is why these electricians should unionize. Or are there other electricians anywhere? It's strange that Richard doesn't enter the individual apartments, but instead runs around inside the walls, as unseen to the residents as the vermin. The underground levels that follow each building are stranger still. Instead of just walking out of a building and then heading into the one next door or across the street, Richard remains hidden from the public eye during transit as well. Each underground level is focused on moving from the electrified building on the far left to the next building on the far right. These levels have 4 layers. The middle 2 are dark, requiring Richard to use a flashlight. The light often reveals impassable barriers, so reaching your next job is never as simple as just running to the right. The bottom layer is a sewer, where a bowl that you can ride on floats back and forth, often under walls or pipes that will scrape Richard off, killing him instantly when he touches the wastewater. Why the sewer is lit, I have no idea, especially given the electrical crisis. The top layer is the surface. You can walk around up there, but you can never reach your goal via the surface. At least most levels feature a secret spot that causes the appearance of an area on the surface to change. Oh look, we restored power to that street somehow. I wish it was that easy to restore power to the individual buildings we climb inside. The environments on display indicate we go far beyond New York City. Now, I'm not sure what just happened to the Capitol, but it seems bad. We might be starting off in Washington, D.C. This is the first time I ever heard of a hidden tunnel underneath the Capitol. It's the Golden Gate Bridge there, right? If you're ever in San Francisco and can manage to, be sure to check out Good Mongkok Bakery. Look, we appear to be out west. Richard has embarked on quite a journey on foot. The underground enemies are distinct from those in the building levels. Richard can repel moles by shining the flashlight on them, which seems odd since moles are blind, so wouldn't know the difference. He can jump on turtles to stun them. These giant moths are scary. In real life, I'd love giant moths, but in the context of a deadly giant moth flapping through a slimy pitch-black tunnel, no, scary. Also frustrating to navigate around, since you just have to wait. There are also guys in trench coats who can drop power-ups, but in multiple playthroughs, I never had the chance to see what any of the power-ups did. At the end of World 8, a cutscene plays where Richard jumps over the shoulder of who appears to be Lady Liberty. Then Electrician, in the arcade tradition, resets back to World 1, but with your current score. You might expect this second loop to be more challenging or have more levels, but it seemed exactly the same to me. I'm not sure of the implications of an actual living colossus walking around, but someone at Kemco must have liked the idea of the Statue of Liberty being alive, since an even sillier version of this also turns up in Kemco's notorious Superman game. Yeah, despite the grounded premise, I'm starting to think Electrician is not, in fact, keeping it real. I've been to New York, and the rats weren't this big, and the human-sized spiders never seemed this focused on destroying the electrical infrastructure. This is called artistic license. Belying his illuminating name, Richard Light inhabits the shadows of society, behind the scenes in the darkness of every urban area he passes through. Yet the player knows firsthand how challenging and dangerous his work is, and how important. His efforts saved the United States from a blackout. This serves as a metaphor for workers whose contributions are often downplayed or even denigrated despite their centrality to human civilization. Well, sanitation workers are probably more foundational than electricians. They should all be paid better, is what I'm saying. The folks at Kemco might have chosen to emphasize the pan-US setting with the touristy scenery details to honor that this is a remake of an American video game. Unlike in episode 17 of Famicom Adventures, this one was clearly authorized too. Designed by David Bunch, back in the days when a single person could program a whole major video game instead of today when that's reserved for indie titles, the original Electrician came out in 1984, published by Synapse Software for Atari 8-bit computers. It's a shame that so many Japanese video game companies didn't properly credit their developers. I can easily tell you the Atari 800 game is the work of David Bunch, but I can't tell you the names of the Japanese developers whose handiwork and attention to detail I've spent the video describing. The sound design is excellent. The later levels of the Famicom remake are reasonably challenging, but the original Electrician gets to that point by the third building. As usual, the Famicom version is cutesier. Instead of saving the United States from a blackout, the electrician in this one ends by being declared a journeyman electrician and joining the Union. What'd I tell you? Look at this mess. This deadly chaos is what you get if you're not unionized. Electrician came on the same disc as a video game called NYC, New York City, or The Big Apple, a more complex simulation set in exactly the city you'd expect. Why did Kemco choose only Electrician for a Japanese remake out of the whole Synapse catalog? I have no idea. Kemco licensed a number of other foreign computer games for Famicom remakes, including one other Synapse title, Doughboy. NES owners back in the day might have been familiar with Kemco's versions of Spy vs. Spy or Deja Vu, among others, but not Electrician, which stayed exclusive to the Famicom disk system. Kemco's workers seem to have put a lot of care into this one, and the contemporary urban setting is uncommon enough to stand out on the Famicom. Anyway, this is a YouTube video, which means I'm supposed to remind you to like the video by clicking the thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and leave a comment if you want, so the algorithm sees people interacting. I'll have a link to the Famicom Adventures playlist in the video description. Isn't that handy? Also a link to my Ko-fi if you want to send me some money for my work here. This is 3 Famicom Adventures videos straight featuring a remake of an older title. Next time on Famicom Adventures, a pure Famicom original with some high-profile names connected to it too.